plan for the coming financial year, that is 2022-2023, and we will be expecting President Museveni at Kololo Independence Grounds to officiate the conferencing of that financial year under the theme of industrialization, employment, and that is employment growth, as well as empowering very many economic activities around the country. And we're still talking and speaking on how better we can do budgeting in the country, and how better our budgets can really implement sustainable development. And Juliet AKELLO from CSBAG, who is a budget specialist, is still with us. Take a listen and do comment with us, do stay with us and learn. And you know, development is a personal responsibility, and sustainable development for a country also starts with you as an individual. So how can you make sure you help for the better of our economy? Juliet, now let's discuss around revenue, domestic revenue, I can say improvements, collections, or even impacts that have been there. What has been your observation, and how better can we improve it?
Just to talk revenue mobilization, is that one, government has a strategy, domestic revenue mobilization strategy. And that strategy is supposed to run for 5 years, from I think 2018 to about 2023. Now, the implementation of that strategy, the effective implementation of that strategy, actually would bring in lots of revenue if it is implemented effectively. Our revenue right now to GDP, I think, is about 11-12%, but the strategy talks about between 18 to 20%, okay, as an average. But it further goes ahead to say every year there has to be an increment
yes.
of 0.5%. Now, still going back to COVID, knowing that COVID hit the economy, and government majorly gets domestic revenue from taxation and all that, businesses closed, and so they cannot really do that kind of taxation that really they require. So partly it is going to affect the implementation of that strategy. But just to say that revenue mobilization also goes beyond, beyond the domestic one. Revenue mobilization can take the form of, talking to our donor friends. They give us grants. That is also part of it. But also borrowing. That is part of
mobilization.
Governments across the world, many of them really do borrowing. Even the developed countries, they do a lot of borrowing in terms of for them to be able to amass resources to inform their development agenda. I think sometime about 4 or 5 years ago, it was only Libya which didn't have debt across the world. But of course, with whatever happened in Libya, now I don't know what is happening there. But you can imagine a country that can sustain itself and all that. So revenue mobilization really is bigger than the domestic one. But knowing what has happened, our mobilization of revenue internally has gone down. Yeah.
Okay, I get that. And sometimes, like, my mind is winging. Like, I don't know even where to start it from, because it is very huge. I mean, for the taxpayer, like recently there were reports, highlighting how every Ugandan is indebted to 1.5 million to pay, so that at least we cut off the public debt that we have. And as the financial year that was beginning, that is effective of July, we were still speaking of 49.8%. That is almost 50%. We shouldn't really deny that. So our public debt is at 50% of our GDP. And the gross domestic product, or I can say, is the money the government gets in after the annual money. Maybe if you earn salary, after a month. So we are talking about the money the government earns per year. That is the GDP, and I stand to be corrected.
They are rich, in simple terms, riches of a country.
Riches of a country that are counted every year, annually. That is the GDP we're talking about. And the debt, like you might have a mabanja in your family or as an individual, I do not know, but the debt the government of Uganda has, it equals 50%. It's at 50%. That means it's tundu atano towards 50% already is a debt, and 50 is what we are to utilize. This is so worrying. I mean, should it even be worrying, or should it be a normal stake?
Uganda's public debt really is an interesting one.
You also find it interesting and relaxing at the same time.
When you listen to government speaking, they will tell you Uganda's debt is sustainable.
Okay.
When you listen to the IMF speaking, they will tell you, oh, even if it is sustainable, you are actually going into the risky, risky.
We are going towards a crisis.
But knowing that part of our infrastructure development has taken on borrowing. What makes it interesting is the bit of how the debt is managed. Okay? Because even if it were you, if you went to a shop and maybe you don't have money, you went to a shop, requested the shopkeeper to give you a number of items, at the back of your mind, you know that indeed I have to pay back. Okay? Now, when you get those things at the back of your mind, you know you have to pay back, and indeed we work towards paying it back. And we pay back and life continues forever. But here we are borrowing, but then, and of course when you pick whatever you pick from the shop, it is to meet a need, and indeed you meet that.
Because you need it.
Yes.
I don't know to know, sometimes we want it or sometimes we need it. We'll get there.
Here is our debt, where you find it interesting in such a way that sometimes we rush into a debt. I mean, for a loan, you don't contract debt, you contract loans.
Okay.
Yes. When you go in for a loan, when the loan now comes here, you find that we are not ready for that project. And by the time you sign for that loan, and even commitment alone, commitment to take that loan already attracts a fee, which is called commitment fee. Now, by the time that loan hits our accounts, we are supposed to be paying interest. Okay? But many times the loan comes, hits our accounts, and we are not yet ready.
But we continue paying the interest.
But we continue paying interest. We have paid commitment fees. We continue paying interest on it. So you find that the absorption rate of that loan
has gone to wastage.
No, it is low, and we are not benefiting much from that particular loan or project that they are implementing. There are some projects that their term, because there is a term limit from when you borrow and when
you're supposed to pay back.
So you find that between that time when the money is disbursed and the end time of maybe disbursing, because they are disbursed mainly in batches, first batch, second batch. By the time the third batch is being disbursed or sent to the Ugandan account, you realize that maybe the project has only performed up to 17%. Okay? So the management of the debt is where the problem is. And so until we improve on how we manage debt, our debt will always go up. Now in 1819, around 1819, in 1920 we had, our debt was about 35% of GDP. Now when you come to 2020, 2021, it went to 49.9%. And remember, that was about the time when COVID was here. Now, debt has also increased because of this COVID period. There are a number of loans that we are getting from IMF, and these are not for investment. These are to address COVID emergencies, okay? To the Ministry of Health, Social Protection, those kinds of things. Things that you are not investing so that you can get a return. That is money which is just, going and you don't expect a return on it. Now in 2022, that we are talking about 2023, debt is expected to go up to the level of about 54% by the end of this financial year that we have started.
And yet the Ministry of Finance recently was saying the debt is supposed not to be going down.
Yes. The debt is supposed to be going down, but because of the emergency of COVID, somehow it has
uncontrollable.
Yeah, it is not controllable. There you understand. And so that means internally we need to improve on how we manage debt, how our projects are being implemented. And in any case, there are certain projects that maybe you may not consider as priority so much. So you can sequence them in a way that you know that if this one I have finished this project, maybe it will bring in a lot more money. Okay. Because now, knowing that debt is increasing, our domestic revenue is going down. Part of the money that we pay debt with is from domestic resources.
Very well.
In terms of domestic revenue.
And Juliet,
so there is a mismatch.
As CSBAG, do you have any strategies you are helping out, or you intend to help out government to make sure we positively manage and also minimize on our borrowing? Are there any strategies?
Now, government has a domestic management framework, and that I think also ends in 2023. It usually reviews it. I think this is about the 5th or 6th strategy that they are implementing. And so usually we look at, the government uses that as a guide to ensure that they manage their debt well. The most we can do is identify a project that is not working well, then we advise government on, please do it this way, do it the other way. But in terms of managing debt, that is a government.
Have you identified any projects that we really can do without?
That kind of analysis, we have not specifically done it. We have not specifically done the sequencing of which particular project we can do away with. But there are a number of projects. We are just beginning that process in terms of if they can give us information, because any kind of advocacy or analysis depends on the information that you have. So we've started up a relationship with the ministry to provide us with that kind of information so that we are able to look at them, assess and see.
That is good if the ministry is willing to cooperate. And just to let us know, because when we speak about public debt, even you might be like, oh, how am I even concerned if the government has its debts? How can the public put pressure? I do not know. Is it putting pressure on government, or also how can we help even as Ugandans to make sure we solve or we minimize our borrowing? And how I want you to begin it from how debt affects the people or the economy. Let people understand that if this is happening, this is how I'm sharing the burden. If I have the country is undergoing a 50% debt on the GDP, this is how it is affecting me. How can they understand that? So maybe that one will give us a push to ride on with the government or help.
Now, the process of debt contraction, of course, is a state-by-state thing. What happens is, a ministry or an institution, mainly ministries, they identify a need.
Okay.
They identify a need of a particular project. Maybe they need to build up an institution. Maybe, let us look at the Ministry of Education as an example. They might wish to have a particular institution or building, and internal resources cannot actually do this kind of maybe put up that kind of building. So what happens is, when they have identified it and they have identified a creditor, or a creditor who can give them the loan. Then they approach the Ministry of Finance, because it's the Ministry of Finance that actually contracts debt on behalf of all other ministries, or on behalf of citizens, or on behalf of government. So they interest the Ministry of Finance in it. So ministry looks at it, and once they have appreciated it, then that request is taken to Parliament. Okay? And we know that our parliamentarians are the eyes of the people. That is one way in which the public actually participates. So when Parliament approves this loan, then of course the other processes of bringing the loan, getting the loan comes through. So that is stage one of citizens' participation. So the people that we vote in have a mandate. It's like they think on our behalf. Okay? They are our representatives. So when Parliament speaks, depending on who you send to Parliament, know that they are speaking on your behalf. So when they approve a loan,
I have approved.
That is the interesting bit.
Yes.
So of course, after that approval, all other processes of debt contraction continues until the loan is here. When the loan comes and there is that project that is supposed to be put up. Now, citizens also come in at the point of implementation. But many citizens don't know their role. You can monitor the implementation of this kind of project. Okay? You can monitor, see, many times people say, oh, but it is too technical for us, it is too... But as a lay person, if a loan is for building an institution or a house or something for a government institution, and you see a crack on it, that is monitoring enough. You see they are not doing it properly. That is monitoring enough. So at that point, that is where you begin to also participate in that kind of loan monitoring. Because for you think it is just looking at it and what maybe it will not make sense. It makes a lot of sense. Because usually if you've always had people doing whistleblowing about certain things here and there, those are people who know their roles as citizens. Okay? So you monitor it at that point. If something is not correct, your part is to raise it to the authorities so that the authorities take it up.
And surely that's a responsibility there. And Juliet, how true is this, that when the public debt is high, that is when the cost of living is really high in the country for the people, they can't live sustainably, the education management goes high as well, you can't access medical care because government is trying to minimize and strike a balance on how they can cater for other institutions. How right is that?
Now, what happens with public debt and how government provides services?
Yes, please.
Is in such a way that when we contract debt, when we contract a loan, okay, as we are paying back the loan, we pay it back using domestic resources. Okay. So the revenue mobilization we were talking about the domestic revenue mobilization we were talking about, is that part of the money that URA brings into the coffers of government that government uses to pay
as an interest to the loans,
interest and the principal.
Okay.
They pay the interest and principal to the creditor. And now, since we are picking it from our coffers, remember, money for service delivery is reducing. Okay? And that is where you find people complaining about high debt, because they know payment of that debt will come from us, the citizens, in terms of we are being taxed more, because they will put an increment on tax, on sugar. And so as that money is being collected by URA, put into the consolidated fund, government is picking it and paying off the debt, and that is how it affects me as a person.
I pay high taxes. Taxes are increased. Prices on products increase. Isn't that what is happening around?
That is what happens.
And now we don't want that. How can we achieve that?
management of
The debt. We go back earlier to what you said on management.
Management of public debt.
Okay then.
Yeah.
Now it's understood. And just as we are to conclude, let's talk briefly or advise briefly as the national conference is going to be happening. As we plan for the next financial year, how can we better plan for the education system? How can the education system improve? Because now students are not going to school, pupils are not going to school. How can budget help improve our education system for the next financial year? Briefly, Juliet.
I'll still go back to how COVID will still determine how our education system.
So it is still COVID to determine?
Yes,
okay.
Because there is no way government is going to open. You remember the second wave still, how it came about, students were in school and then they came back with COVID and all that and all that. I believe government is being very cautious in terms of reopening schools again. And you have known they are promoting the campaign of
vaccinating teachers.
Let the teachers be vaccinated and then school can be open. We know very well that it really happened. Some parents actually lost children. Those children who were in school who had COVID brought COVID into the community. But it is not to condemn them in any way. I mean, it was just an issue of management. You saw what happened at the park for 2 days when they couldn't move and yet they were interacting. And so I believe government is being very cautious in terms of reopening schools. Now, when you talk about continuing education, many people have taken on the proposal of digitalizing, studying online and all that, but not many children can actually afford online education. And that will affect the level of education, it will affect the quality of education across the country. Because you have a generation that is not accessing education, then you have a generation that is accessing education. So the quality of human resource at a certain generation T in future will kind of be compromised. It will definitely be compromised. But maybe just to give advice to parents, there is something called actual age and chronological age. When you look at, for the past several years, the education system, especially the people whom you would call professionals, they have brought in the idea of making children go to school when they are still very young. Of course, the economic situation kind of forces parents to take children to school when they are still very young. But when you look at the age of a child and the kind of academic work that they do is not correlated, So if the brain is not fully developed, I can tell you it will affect a child's level of education even later when they grow. From around senior 2, senior 3, senior 4, they get affected because then the kind of information that they are receiving at that age is not for that particular brain advanced level. And so it affects the child later in life in terms of really picking the things and then applying. And that's why our education system is more of pumping the child to cram. When they come out of school, they are not able to actually apply what they have studied.
How better are we going? Can we go by this just in 30 seconds?
Go by
that kind of curriculum. What is the appeal?
For me, I wouldn't mind that now children are going back to their respective classes because at that age the brains have matured enough. I know parents are worried my child is growing and all that.
Breasts are coming,
but
2 years down.
But actually the development of the child to acquire a certain level of academic work is what is most important for a child to be, a quality kind of child who has gone through education.
Okay, Juliet, thank you so much. And just again in seconds, if you could rise up as we conclude your appeals to what areas that you think should be really touched and should be considered heavily as we plan for the next financial year. Just in seconds, what areas?
I think government can do a lot of boosting economic recovery in such a way that the people who are doing businesses can be given affordable access to credit. That is number one, because then you realize that even government itself has a lot of domestic arrears in the private sector. So if domestic arrears are paid to the private sector so that they can remain in business. But we also know that most of our businesses are not big. Many of them are small businesses. So maybe if they are given access to that kind of affordable credit facility, then that would improve on our economic recovery as quickly as possible. But then also improving on the digitalization process, you know, because most things now are going digital. When COVID came, we didn't know we would even go digital. People didn't know they would work from home and they're effective. People didn't know they would do businesses online, you know, but now that is the trend. So I think if they improve on or fasten the digitalization process.
Digitalization and then boosting, I can say businesses. Boosting businesses and then digitalization. Can I take that only, or you have an additional, just in 10 seconds?
Maybe the other thing is vaccination still.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we will not go back on vaccination. We have talked about it a lot. Thank you so much, Juliet, for having highlighted on these issues. And in case you missed out, you can surely get to follow the conversation on our social media platforms at Smart24 TV. We were speaking about the expectations on the next financial year, that is on 2022-2023, that is now ongoing around Kololo Independence Grounds. We expect President Museveni to officiate that conference, and Smart24 TV will be airing that for you, bringing that for you on your screen. And they are doing that under the theme of industrialization for inclusive growth, employment and wealth creation, and have got also the budget strategies that is onto focusing on the strategy of recovery, that is on the widespread of vaccination, boosting aggregate demand and credit relief. We talked about that earlier, as well as including industrialization and increasing productivity through agriculture. We'll be still waiting on that. And Smart24 TV will surely be engaging different people on how we can relate to these issues. And that ends our conversation right about now. Coming up, we have got a news hour right here on SNB, but it continues. I'm Rita Cabanyero.